Hi, thanks for checking out my video. My name is Daryl. I'm a flooring repair technician and owner of harmonyflooringservice.com. Today's video is about a project where I was asked to fill in some gaps in a hardwood floor where a piece of cabinet had been removed. This is part of a kitchen renovation, and also to repair some damage to the hardwood floor in the bathroom. The customer had very little material available to do these repairs, and they had underestimated the extent of the water damage in the bathroom. I made the suggestion to them that we look at pulling up the entire bathroom floor, tossing out the water-damaged material, and recycling the non-damaged material for the repairs. One of the advantages of this actually is that the flooring was all installed at the same time, and so the discoloration that occurs in hardwood flooring over time was very close to the same in both of these areas. It was not just sunlight that caused the aging, but time. So unlike the new material that they had available, the few boards that were there, which were new and very light in color, similar to the color of those underneath the cabinet, the boards that came out of the bathroom were a very suitable match for our patchwork. So this is positive and good reason to use that material. So you'll see here, I'm mapping out the salvaged material, how I'm going to use it to fill in the area that was underneath the cabinet originally. I made a number of white marks on the floor to provide some kind of sense of where I'm going to cut the existing boards in the floor. This is something I have to do because we don't have enough material to replace the entire length of each board that has a section that needs to be replaced. So we're just going to replace those sections. But we need to be careful that we align the joints in such a way that it looks like a proper installation. Here I'm putting some double-face tape on the back of a small square. This is going to allow me to fasten it to the floor and use that as a guide for the oscillating saw. One of the tricks with cutting the boards like this is that you need to try to get the cutting tip of the blade right into the groove of the board that's staying. You're trying to cut off the tongue of the board in question. And that tongue is obviously between the grooves of the adjoining board. So it can be a bit of a trick to kind of reach it in there all the way without causing any damage to the board you want to save. You'll see in this video that I will on occasion need to go in and cut a little bit more as I'm taking the pieces out. And I will even also occasionally need to get out the chisel and try to chisel out small remaining pieces of tongue from between the grooves of the remaining boards. Just going to carry on here, cutting some of these. So this time lapse, the original length of the time lapse was about 25 minutes, and that represented about 7 hours of work, I believe. This project was completed in one day. Obviously, I'm not going to retain the entire length of the time lapse. I'm going to remove some repetitions. Once you kind of get a sense of what's going on, we can jump ahead and you'll have a look at various stages. So there we've finished all of our cuts, all of our horizontal cuts across the width of the boards where we're going to be removing them. And now I'm making lengthwise cuts in the boards that are coming out of the floor in order to remove them using a plunge cut circular saw with adjustable depth and connects to a vacuum. So we're not going to do damage to the subfloor, and we're keeping the dust inconvenience of the dust to a minimum. The primary boards that require sawing with the saw are boards that the portion that's being removed extends in between boards that are meant to remain in the floor. make some diagonal cuts across the boards that are coming out to give myself an access point to lift the board out one half at a time. Or using a chisel to split the boards along the grain in the last quarter inch or so where the saw blade doesn't reach right to the end of the board. And this end against the cabinet, we have a little more length to split. They're not really splitting for us because the boards extend underneath the cabinet some length. This is a bit of an unusual installation in that the hardwood was put down before the kitchen island was put in and gaps were left in the floor. So I'm presuming that the installers were following some kind of instruction or some kind of assumptions about where the plumbing access was going to be and installed the floor as a complete floor, leaving out a few boards for those access points. And obviously when the cabinet came up, those voids were exposed. Typically a floor would be put in after the cabinet would be put in and you wouldn't really have any material underneath it. So there I'm pulling out the middle section, then I'll pull out the groove side of the board, and then the tongue side of the board still has nails in it, and I will cut the nails at the floor level with the oscillating saw and pull the boards out. I don't particularly like to pry on the material that's still nailed to the floor. I mean, you can pull it up and pull the nails out, but you have a risk of damaging the boards that you want to save. And damaging boards is never a great idea because you're quickly going to run out of material and just create more work for yourself. So I do prefer to cut them. There I had to cut a little bit more across the width because my board was not completely cut through. You see that's the case fairly often, that as I said, even though you try to reach and cut off all of that board from the top side blindly, often you will have to do some touch-up to finish those cuts. Just continuing with cutting and removing, cutting the nails and removing, splitting, prying up sections, pulling out parts, cutting nails to remove complete boards, so on and so on. Now, this process is quite similar, whether I'm replacing a single board or a group of boards like this. It's a very similar process. Cut the board down the middle, cut a diagonal, pull half of each middle section up, pull the groove side off, cut the nail side nails, pull it out, and then cut the board to fit a replacement. There were the boards not protruded into the floor. We just have to cut the nails and tap it out to lift it up. All right, we're done pulling out the material. We're just going to clean up the site and get ready to start putting things in. So wherever I've cut the floor, I've got a square end to the board. And this is a little bit different than the typical beveled end of a manufacturer pre-finished floor. So this requires that I do a little bit of filing work to recreate a bevel on the existing board, on the board that's left in the floor, on the portion of the board that's left in the floor. I also need to file bevels on the ends, the cut ends of the boards I'm putting into the floor. And in all of these cases where I'm filing to create a bevel, I also need to put a little bit of stain on those boards. So you see I'm cutting the board, fitting it in. In some cases I'm cutting off part of the tongue of the board that's going in so that I can push it down from the top. Using a little bit of special Bona flooring adhesive on the sections that are between existing boards because I can't get a nail into there. So we want a good bond to the floor. We don't want the floor making any squeaking noises because it's got movement and so forth later. And we will nail it with the nail gun wherever I can access it with the nail gun. You may also notice that occasionally I'll take out a palm nailer. This I will use in a couple of different scenarios. Once in a while, the cleat nailer doesn't drive the nail all the way in. And I can finish setting that nail with the palm nailer. It drives a single nail one at a time. Later on here, I will use the palm nailer to nail boards where I don't have enough clearance to fit the cleat nailer in. Next one going in doesn't require any glue at the ends because it's a complete board. Just mark the length. I like to mark the length of my boards with a utility knife, the cut mark. And I like to do this because it provides a very thin line, and you can set the saw to cut exactly on the side of that line that you're keeping. I find pencil lines are a little bit thick and a little bit arbitrary as to which side of the line you're cutting with the saw. So here I'm going to slide this board in. I'll just pop out to get my bulldog tool. And the bulldog tool is primarily meant for laminate flooring, but it's also very good for hardwood. Put some strong double-faced tape on the bottom side of it, and you can attach it to the floor and slide the boards into place. In the case of a laminate floor, open up the floor to do some repairs. So the flooring was a little too tight for me to slide that one in, so I've pulled it back out and decided to drop it in from the top. So again, I've had to cut a portion of the tongue off of that board, use some adhesive, put it in place, and then we'll nail the row when we get this other piece in. A little filing, staining, positioning, and nailing. We're just checking our ends and our alignment for joints, making some selections. One of the things that I'm using the palm nailer to set a couple of nails a little bit deeper. I often find that when the cleat nailer is near the end of its supply of nails, the last couple of nails might not set quite as deep and need to be driven a little bit further. One of the important factors in doing this kind of a repair is that you have a proper humidity level in the flooring before you start. If the humidity in the house is a little bit high, the boards will very likely be a little bit swollen, and the floor will be tight. And when you open up that floor, the floor can actually close in on you somewhat and make the spaces that you're working with smaller. And additionally, if you're trying to put slightly wider than normal material into the floor, very quickly you're going to run out of space. You're going to end up with a misalignment and be forced to cut down the width of your boards. While this can be done, and some people do it, and in some cases you don't have any choice but to do it. I don't particularly like to take this approach because it's a very high likelihood that when the floor returns to a more normal, lower humidity, that the floor can open up and create a gap where you've installed a narrower board. There we're putting in the last few pieces. I've used the palm nailer again to set nails in those last couple of rows where the cabinet didn't provide me clearance and blocked me from using the cleat nailer. And there with the last board, it's like a traditional single board replacement. I'm using the Bona glue underneath the middle portion of the board and some wood joint glue to glue the tongue and groove together. I will, in a case like that board, I will cut off the bottom of the groove portion of the replacement board so that it can slip in. I like to keep as much of the original tongue and groove material intact as possible, which helps with the alignment of the new floor to the old. I set a couple of nails there, pin nails, just to keep everything in the adhesive so it doesn't move while it's setting. And then here we have a couple of images of the finished result. You can hardly tell that there was any work done here. The contractor and the homeowner are both quite thrilled with the result. They're going to go ahead and install a new floor of a more water resistant material in the bathroom so they don't have future water damage. And that's the end of our video. Thank you for watching.